Some faces belong to the past, until destiny walks back into the room wearing the future beside it. The Grand Moon Ball had always been the most anticipated night across the Northern Territories, where every alpha, beta, and honored Luna gathered beneath glittering crystal chandeliers to celebrate another year of peace beneath the moon goddess's blessing. The towering ballroom inside Blackwood's citadel shimmered with silver banners, polished marble floors, and thousands of candlelights reflected through towering windows overlooking endless pine forests. Elegant orchestras filled the air with graceful melodies while nobles exchanged careful smiles. Every conversation wrapped in ambition, admiration, or carefully hidden envy. Tonight belonged to Alpha King Cain Blackwood. 5 years had transformed him from the youngest ruler in the kingdom into the most respected alpha alive. His broad shoulders carried the quiet confidence of a leader who had ended old rivalries without endless battles, rebuilt forgotten villages, and united dozens of packs beneath one banner. Yet those closest to him understood there remained one victory he had never claimed: the silence inside his heart. As Cain descended the sweeping staircase overlooking the ballroom, every conversation softened into respectful whispers. Noble families bowed. Visiting alphas inclined their heads. Young wolves admired the legendary king, whose silver-gray eyes missed nothing. Cain acknowledged each greeting with calm dignity, though his attention wandered beyond smiling faces and ceremonial traditions. Every Grand Moon Ball reminded him of another night long ago when laughter had filled this same hall beside the woman everyone believed had betrayed him. 5 years. Long enough for kingdoms to heal. Long enough for forests to regrow after wildfire. Long enough for nearly everyone to stop speaking her name. Claire Ashford. Once the Luna destined to stand beside him forever. Now little more than a memory carried by moonlight and regret. He had trained himself not to search crowded rooms anymore. Hope was a dangerous habit. Yet some nights refused to obey reason. Lord Harrison Whitmore, the royal advisor, stepped quietly beside him. "Your Majesty, delegations from East Ridge have arrived." Cain nodded without looking away from the entrance. "Escort them personally." Harrison hesitated, recognizing the distant expression in the king's eyes before bowing once more. Guests continued flowing through enormous carved oak doors while musicians welcomed each family with elegant harmony. Rich velvet gowns brushed polished stone. Jewel-covered cloaks shimmered beneath candlelight. Children laughed softly beside their parents, filling the ballroom with warmth rarely found inside royal ceremonies. Then, without warning, everything changed. The music continued. Conversations continued. Yet for Cain, the world became perfectly still. A woman stepped through the entrance wearing a midnight blue gown that moved like flowing water beneath the chandeliers. Her dark hair rested gently across one shoulder. She neither hurried nor sought attention. She simply entered with quiet grace, carrying herself with the calm confidence of someone who had survived storms no one else could see. Cain forgot to breathe. Claire. She looked older by only a few gentle years, wiser somehow, yet the kindness within her eyes remained untouched by time. Gasps rippled across nearby guests as one noble recognized her, then another. Whispers spread faster than music. "Is that? It can't be. Claire Ashford." But no whisper lasted longer than a heartbeat because everyone noticed what Cain noticed next. 2 small children walked beside her. A boy and a girl, perhaps 4 years old, dressed in matching formal silver outfits. They stayed close to Claire without fear, their tiny hands occasionally brushing hers as they admired the dazzling ballroom with innocent wonder. The little boy glanced upward first. Moonlight pouring through stained glass windows illuminated his face for only a second, but it was enough. His dark hair, his silver-gray eyes, the unmistakable shape of his smile. Beside him, the little girl turned toward a nearby fountain, revealing the same calm expression, the same eyes, the same unmistakable resemblance. A stunned silence rolled through the ballroom like an invisible wave. Cain remained frozen where he stood. Every instinct inside him whispered the same impossible truth before his mind could reject it. Those children looked exactly like him. Claire felt every pair of eyes settle on her the moment the whispers began, but she refused to lower her head. 5 years earlier, she would have shrunk beneath the weight of judgment, wondering which mistake she had made or which rumor she had failed to outrun. That woman no longer existed. Life had quietly replaced fear with purpose. Every difficult sunrise, every lonely winter morning, every bedtime story whispered beside a small fireplace had reshaped her into someone stronger than the frightened Luna who had vanished from Blackwood Citadel without a single farewell. Noah tugged gently on her sleeve, his silver eyes sparkling with innocent excitement as he gazed across the magnificent ballroom. "Mama," he whispered softly, "is this where the Alpha King lives?" Claire forced a warm smile despite the storm inside her chest. "Only tonight," she answered gently. "Tonight, this is simply where everyone comes together." Lily reached for her mother's hand, squeezing it with tiny fingers that somehow always knew when Claire needed comfort more than she did. "There are so many lights," she said with quiet wonder. "It looks like the stars came inside." Claire looked down at her daughter and smiled with genuine affection. "I think the stars are jealous tonight." The children laughed softly, completely unaware that nearly every noble in the room had forgotten the orchestra, forgotten the celebration, forgotten even their own conversations. The only thing anyone could see was the impossible resemblance between the twins and the king standing across the ballroom. King could not move. His heart pounded with a force he had not felt since the day Claire disappeared. He studied every detail carefully, almost desperately, searching for reason where only questions existed. The little boy tilted his head exactly the way Cain always had while listening. The little girl brushed a loose strand of dark hair behind her ear, using the same absent-minded gesture his own mother had once teased him about. It was impossible, and yet nothing had ever seemed more undeniable. Harrison returned quietly to Cain's side, following the king's gaze before his expression slowly changed. "Your Majesty," he murmured. Cain did not answer immediately. His eyes never left the children. Finally, he asked in a calm voice that concealed enormous emotion, "Did anyone know she was alive?" Harrison hesitated. No official report ever confirmed it. After she vanished, every search came back empty. Most believed she had chosen another territory. Cain closed his eyes for one brief moment. Chosen. That word had haunted him for years. Everyone insisted Claire had abandoned her title, her home, and their future. Some claimed she had betrayed the crown. Others insisted she simply no longer loved him. Cain had never accepted any explanation completely, yet pride and heartbreak had slowly built a wall around every unanswered question. Until tonight. Now that wall had begun to crack. Across the ballroom, Claire accepted greetings from several older pack elders who had once shown her kindness before everything fell apart. Elder Margaret stepped forward first, her silver hair neatly braided beneath a ceremonial shawl embroidered with moonflowers. She looked at Claire for several silent seconds before embracing her warmly. "You survived," the elderly woman whispered with tears gathering in her eyes. Claire returned the embrace gently. "I had two very important reasons to survive." Margaret's gaze lowered toward the twins. Understanding flickered across her face, followed almost immediately by astonishment. "Oh, my child," she breathed quietly. Claire offered only a small smile. She did not confirm anything. She did not deny anything either. Noah looked curiously at the elderly woman. "Hello, ma'am. Mama says it is polite to introduce yourself before asking questions." Margaret laughed through her emotion. "That is very wise advice." Noah extended his small hand proudly. "My name is Noah Ashford." Lily followed immediately. "And I am Lily Ashford. We are twins." Their cheerful innocence softened even the sternest expressions nearby. Several nobles smiled despite themselves. Others exchanged increasingly uneasy glances. Rumors multiplied with every passing second. No one understood why Claire had returned after so many years. No one understood why she had brought the children here instead of remaining hidden somewhere beyond the Northern Territories. But everyone sensed that this night had already changed the future of every pack represented inside Blackwood Citadel. Claire finally looked across the ballroom. For the first time since entering, her eyes met Cain's. Neither of them smiled. Neither of them looked away. 5 years of unanswered questions stood silently between them. Cain searched her face for anger, for resentment, perhaps even for forgiveness. But what he found instead was something infinitely harder to understand. Peace. Not happiness. Not bitterness. Simply the quiet strength of someone who had already accepted yesterday and learned how to keep walking toward tomorrow. Before either of them could take a single step, The master of ceremonies struck the ceremonial staff against the marble floor. His clear voice echoed throughout the grand hall. Honored guests, by tradition of the Grand Moon Ball, every visiting family shall now be formally presented before the royal court. An uneasy hush settled over the ballroom. Claire glanced down at Noah and Lily, gently straightening the sleeves of their silver jackets. The twins smiled up at her with complete trust. Then the master of ceremonies opened the royal register, looked directly toward Claire, and spoke the next name aloud for every soul inside Blackwood Citadel to hear. The master of ceremonies lifted the royal register with both hands, his measured voice carrying effortlessly across the silent ballroom. Presenting Lady Claire Ashford of Silver Creek, accompanied by her children, Noah Ashford and Lily Ashford. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Claire gently nodded to her twins, and together they walked across the polished marble floor toward the center of the grand hall. Hundreds of eyes followed every graceful step. The orchestra continued playing, but the music had faded into little more than a distant whisper beneath the growing tide of curiosity. Noah stood proudly beside his mother with remarkable confidence for a child his age. Lily stayed close to Claire, occasionally looking around with bright, fascinated eyes that reflected every candlelight dancing across the crystal chandeliers. They had never seen anything so magnificent, yet neither child seemed intimidated. Claire had taught them long ago that true confidence came from kindness, not titles. Cain remained where he stood at the foot of the royal staircase. His pulse refused to settle. Every instinct urged him to walk forward, to ask the questions that had haunted countless sleepless nights, but years of discipline held him still. A king did not rush into emotion before an entire kingdom. Yet tonight he was beginning to wonder whether he could remain only a king. Noah suddenly looked toward one of the towering stained glass windows where moonlight spilled across the ballroom floor. "Mama," he whispered with genuine amazement, "the moon looks bigger here." Claire smiled softly. "That is because the windows were built to welcome her light." Lily tilted her head. "Grandma Evelyn used to say the moon watches families even when they are far apart." Claire's smile trembled almost invisibly. She did. Cain heard every word. Evelyn, Claire's grandmother. The gentle woman who had always treated him like family before everything changed. A memory surfaced without warning. 5 years ago, Evelyn had placed a comforting hand on his shoulder after one difficult council meeting and quietly said, "The strongest wolves are not the ones who never lose hope. They are the ones who protect it." He had not understood those words then. Now they echoed inside him with unexpected weight. Around the ballroom, nobles continued exchanging uncertain glances. Lord Benjamin Hawthorne leaned toward Lady Eleanor Sinclair and whispered, "The resemblance cannot be coincidence." Eleanor answered without taking her eyes off Noah, "I have attended every royal gathering for 20 years. I have never seen children look so much like the Alpha King." Another voice joined quietly, "Even the color of their eyes. And his smile. Look at the way the boy stands." The whispers spread farther with every passing second. Claire heard them all, but she had prepared herself for this moment during every mile of the long journey back to Blackwood Citadel. She knew people would stare. She knew questions would come. What she could not predict was how calm she would actually feel standing beneath those same chandeliers that had once witnessed her happiest dreams and deepest heartbreak. Noah noticed everyone watching them and leaned closer to his mother. "Did we forget something?" he asked quietly. Claire gently brushed a hand across his neatly combed hair. "No, sweetheart." "Then why is everybody looking at us?" Before Claire could answer, Lily smiled brightly. "Maybe they like your haircut." Noah frowned thoughtfully before smiling back. "Maybe." Several nearby guests could not help smiling at the exchange. Even the oldest council members softened as they watched the twins' effortless innocence. They were simply children, completely untouched by court politics or old misunderstandings. Harrison quietly stepped beside Cain once more. "Your Majesty, shall I continue the introductions?" Cain answered without looking away from Claire. "Not yet." Harrison studied the king's expression carefully. During years of loyal service, he had seen Cain negotiate impossible treaties, settle territorial disputes, and remain perfectly composed beneath overwhelming pressure. He had never seen him look like this. Hope and regret existed together in his eyes, each refusing to surrender to the other. At the center of the ballroom, Noah's attention drifted toward the royal crest displayed high above the throne. The silver wolf engraved into polished stone immediately captured his imagination. "Mama," he whispered excitedly, pointing upward. "That wolf looks exactly like the one on my necklace." Claire instinctively reached toward the small silver chain hidden beneath Noah's formal jacket. Her fingers rested there for only a second before she slowly lowered her hand again. Cain noticed the gesture immediately. He remembered that necklace. He had commissioned it himself years earlier from the finest craftsmen in the Northern Territories. There had only ever been one identical piece. His heart skipped. That design had never been offered to the public. It belonged only to the royal family. Before he could process the realization, Noah looked directly across the ballroom. His silver eyes met Cain's for the very first time. Instead of fear, curiosity brightened the little boy's face. He smiled warmly and raised one small hand in a friendly wave. The Alpha King, who had faced countless leaders without hesitation, found himself unable to breathe as an unfamiliar feeling settled deep inside his heart. A quiet certainty that this little boy somehow already felt strangely, wonderfully familiar. The little boy's cheerful wave lingered in the air for only a second, yet its effect spread through the ballroom like a pebble dropped into perfectly still water. Cain found himself lifting his own hand almost instinctively before years of royal discipline reminded him where he stood. He lowered it again, but not before Noah's smile grew even brighter. Lily noticed the exchange and gently tugged on her brother's sleeve. "I think the king smiled at you," she whispered. Noah nodded with complete certainty. "He has kind eyes." Claire heard every word. Her heart tightened as memories she had worked so hard to quiet began stirring once again. Once upon a time, she had believed those same silver eyes would always be the safest place she could ever call home. She slowly inhaled, reminding herself why she had returned. Not for old dreams. Not for unfinished love. She had come because the truth deserved daylight. Before she could gather her thoughts, the elegant sound of heels crossing marble echoed across the grand hall. Lady Victoria Ravenshire approached from the front of the royal court, surrounded by several noble women whose polished smiles carried little warmth. Victoria had long been considered one of the most influential unmarried ladies among the northern packs. For years, many believed she would eventually become the next Luna beside Cain. Tonight, however, her confident posture seemed strained beneath carefully controlled disappointment. She stopped a respectful distance from Claire and offered a graceful bow that never quite reached her eyes. "Lady Claire," she said with flawless courtesy. "It has certainly been a long time." Claire returned the gesture with equal politeness. "It has." Victoria glanced toward the twins, allowing only the briefest pause before speaking again. "Your children are lovely." "Thank you," Claire answered simply. The resemblance has become quite the topic of conversation. Claire remained calm. "Children often remind us of someone." Victoria smiled, although the expression felt as delicate as thin glass. "Indeed they do." Around them, conversation slowed as more guests quietly drifted closer, pretending to admire decorations while listening to every word. Noah looked up at Victoria with innocent curiosity. "Hello, ma'am." Victoria looked down, momentarily caught off guard by his cheerful greeting. "Hello." Noah smiled politely. "Mama says everybody deserves kindness when you meet them." Several nearby elders exchanged approving glances. Victoria hesitated before answering. "Your mother taught you well." Lily stepped closer to Claire, quietly wrapping both hands around her mother's arm. She always sensed tension before fully understanding it. Claire gently rested her hand over her daughter's, silently reassuring her that everything was all right. Then Victoria turned toward the royal platform, where Cain continued watching from across the ballroom. "Your Majesty," she called with measured elegance. "Perhaps this unexpected reunion deserves proper clarification. Rumors have a habit of growing larger than truth." The room became perfectly silent. Every noble understood the challenge hidden beneath her carefully chosen words. Cain descended the final steps with calm authority, each measured stride commanding respectful space through the gathering crowd. He stopped several feet from Claire, close enough to see every familiar detail of her face, yet far enough to honor the distance that 5 silent years had created. Neither of them spoke immediately. The silence itself carried more emotion than any speech could have held. Finally, Cain addressed the gathering instead of Claire. "The Grand Moon Ball welcomes every invited guest under the protection of the crown. His voice remained steady and composed. Courtesy shall guide every conversation tonight. Most guests bowed their heads in agreement, but Victoria was not finished. Of course, Your Majesty. Yet the royal court also values honesty. Questions affecting the kingdom deserve answers. Elder Margaret frowned gently. This is neither the place nor the moment. Victoria answered respectfully. With all due respect, Elder, every family represented here has already begun asking the same question. She looked once more toward Noah and Lily. Who are these children? The questions settled over the ballroom with enormous weight. Claire closed her eyes for one brief heartbeat before opening them again. She had expected this moment eventually. She simply had not imagined it would arrive so quickly. Noah looked between the adults, confused by the sudden seriousness. Did we do something wrong? He asked softly. Cain answered before anyone else could. No. His reply came instantly, warm and reassuring. You have done nothing wrong. Noah relaxed immediately, accepting the king's words without hesitation. Claire noticed the exchange and felt a familiar ache deep within her heart. Even without knowing why, Noah trusted the man standing before him. Harrison quietly approached the royal platform carrying an ancient leather-bound ceremonial ledger used for recording important declarations before the assembled packs. He leaned toward Cain and spoke softly enough that only those nearest could hear. Your Majesty, according to tradition, if the royal court chooses to address a matter of family lineage during the Grand Moon Ball, the council elders must witness the proceedings. Cain looked at the old ledger without touching it. Across from him, Claire met his gaze once again. Neither fear nor anger appeared in her eyes this time, only quiet acceptance. She gave the smallest, almost imperceptible nod, as though she had already decided long before arriving that hiding was no longer possible. Cain slowly placed one hand upon the ceremonial ledger and looked toward the gathered council. Then let the elders assemble, he said calmly. While throughout the magnificent ballroom, every guest realized the evening's celebration had quietly become something far greater than anyone had expected. The council elders slowly gathered before the royal platform, their ceremonial silver cloaks brushing softly across the marble floor as generations of tradition unfolded beneath the glow of moonlit windows. No one spoke above a whisper anymore. Even the musicians quietly lowered their instruments, allowing silence to settle over the ballroom with unexpected dignity. Noah looked around curiously before leaning toward Claire. Mama, why is everybody so quiet now? Claire gently squeezed his shoulder. Sometimes people become quiet when they are waiting to understand something important. Noah nodded thoughtfully. Grandma Evelyn used to say listening is harder than talking. Elder Margaret smiled warmly. Your grandmother was a wise woman. Lily's attention wandered toward a long banquet table decorated with carved wooden wolves and silver candles. Can we still have dessert later? She asked with innocent hope. A few guests laughed softly, and the heavy tension eased for a brief moment. Claire brushed a loose strand of hair away from Lily's face. I certainly hope so. Cain watched the exchange with quiet disbelief. Every gentle word Claire spoke reminded him of the woman he had once known, while every smile from the twins awakened questions he could no longer ignore. He had spent 5 years convincing himself that the chapter had ended forever, yet standing only a few feet away were 2 children whose laughter somehow felt painfully familiar, as though pieces of a forgotten future had unexpectedly walked back into his life. Elder Thomas Ashcroft, the oldest member of the Royal Council, stepped forward carrying the ceremonial ledger. His calm voice reflected decades of wisdom. Before this gathering proceeds, tradition requires that no accusation be spoken without evidence and no judgment be formed without truth. Heads bowed respectfully throughout the hall. Thomas continued, Lady Claire, you returned under royal invitation. No law demands that you answer private matters before this assembly. However, should you choose to speak, every elder here shall ensure your words are heard fairly. Claire remained silent for several moments. She looked first at Noah, then at Lily. The twins smiled back with complete trust, unaware that every decision their mother made tonight would shape the rest of their lives. Noah suddenly reached into the inside pocket of his small silver jacket. Mama, he whispered, I almost forgot. He carefully removed a folded piece of paper that had been creased many times from being carried everywhere. I wanted to show you this after dinner. Claire accepted it with gentle surprise. What is it? Noah grinned proudly. I drew our family. Lily immediately brightened. Mine is on the other side. Curious smiles appeared across nearby faces. Claire slowly unfolded the paper. Crayon drawings covered both sides in bright colors. One picture showed Claire standing between Noah and Lily beneath a giant silver moon. The second drawing was different. It showed 4 figures holding hands. Claire stared at it quietly. Noah pointed proudly toward the tallest figure. That is the king. Complete silence swept across the ballroom again. Noah continued with simple honesty. Grandma Evelyn always told us stories about a brave alpha king who protected everybody. I thought if he is nice, maybe one day he could be our friend too. Lily smiled and added, I drew him taller because Noah said kings are always tall. Several elders exchanged emotional glances. King could not look away from the child's drawing. His heart tightened with every innocent word. Claire carefully folded the paper again, her eyes shimmering though her voice remained steady. They loved listening to old stories before bed. Cain finally spoke, his voice quieter than anyone had ever heard inside the royal court. You told them about me? Claire met his gaze. Only the good parts. The answer struck him more deeply than any accusation ever could have. After everything that had happened, after years of silence and unanswered questions, she had still chosen kindness whenever the children asked about the Alpha King. Harrison lowered his eyes respectfully, giving the former couple a moment no one wished to interrupt. Then Noah noticed the silver chain resting beneath Cain's formal collar. His eyes widened with excitement. Mama, he exclaimed softly. Look, he pointed toward the king with unmistakable enthusiasm. He has the same wolf necklace as mine. Every eye immediately shifted toward the 2 matching pendants. Cain instinctively touched the small silver wolf hidden beneath his ceremonial coat. Claire slowly closed her eyes. The moment she had hoped to postpone had arrived on its own. Elder Thomas looked first at Cain, then toward Noah. Your Majesty, he asked carefully, may we examine the child's necklace? Claire knelt beside Noah before anyone else could answer. May I borrow it for just a moment? Noah smiled without hesitation. Of course, Mama. She carefully unclasped the delicate silver chain and placed it gently into Elder Thomas's waiting hands. The elderly council leader studied the tiny pendant beneath the candlelight. His experienced fingers traced every engraved detail before his expression gradually changed from curiosity to astonishment. He slowly opened the ceremonial ledger and compared the pendant with an ancient illustration preserved inside its first pages. His breathing grew noticeably slower. Looking up toward the assembled nobles, Elder Thomas spoke with unmistakable gravity. There is only one family in the Northern Territories permitted to bear this royal crest, and this pendant was never crafted for public use. Every guest leaned forward as the elder carefully turned the necklace over in his trembling hands, revealing something that had remained hidden against the child's jacket until this very moment. Elder Thomas slowly turned the small silver pendant beneath the candlelight until the engraving hidden on its back became visible. A quiet gasp moved through the gathered nobles. Delicately carved into the polished metal was the ancient royal crest of House Blackwood, surrounded by 2 words written in the old language of the Northern Territories. For our future. The elder closed his eyes for a brief moment before looking toward Cain. Your Majesty, he said softly. I remember this commission. Cain felt the air leave his lungs. So do I. His voice was almost a whisper. 5 years earlier, on the first anniversary of his mating ceremony with Claire, he had secretly commissioned 2 matching pendants from the royal jeweler. One had remained around his own neck every single day since then. The second had disappeared the same night Claire vanished. He had believed it was lost forever. Yet somehow it had found its way into the hands of a little boy who stood only a few feet away looking completely confused by the attention surrounding his necklace. Noah tilted his head. Did I do something wrong again? Elder Thomas immediately smiled with grandfatherly warmth. Not at all, young man. You have simply reminded some old people of memories they thought were gone forever. Noah seemed satisfied with the explanation. Okay. Lily looked toward her brother with a thoughtful expression. I told you your necklace was special. Noah smiled proudly. Grandma Evelyn said it was a family treasure. Claire quietly lowered her eyes. Hearing Evelyn's name again filled her heart with equal measures of gratitude and sorrow. During the lonely years after leaving Blackwood Citadel, Her grandmother had become the steady light that helped her rebuild a peaceful life for the twins. Every bedtime story, every lesson about kindness, every reminder that bitterness never healed anything had shaped Noah and Lily into the children standing here tonight. Cain slowly stepped forward. No one stopped him. Every guest instinctively made room as the Alpha King approached Claire and the twins for the first time in 5 years. He stopped at a respectful distance and knelt so his eyes met the children's instead of looking down upon them. The entire ballroom watched in complete silence. Noah studied him with open curiosity. "Hello again," he said cheerfully. Cain smiled, and for the first time that evening it reached his eyes. "Hello, Noah." The little boy blinked. "You remembered my name." "Yes." Cain's voice remained gentle. "I think it is a very good name." Lily leaned slightly closer to her brother before looking directly at Cain. "Mama says remembering people's names makes them feel important." Cain nodded slowly. "Your mother has always been right about many things." Claire looked away for a moment, unable to hide the emotion that crossed her face. Cain noticed it immediately. There had been a time when conversations between them had flowed as naturally as breathing. Now every sentence carried the careful weight of years left unexplained. Noah looked thoughtfully at Cain's necklace. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Did somebody give you yours too?" Cain instinctively touched the silver wolf resting against his chest. He hesitated only briefly before answering honestly. "Yes, someone very important did." Noah smiled. "That makes us alike." Cain felt his heart tighten again. "Yes," he answered quietly. "Perhaps it does." Elder Margaret stepped beside Claire and gently rested a comforting hand upon her shoulder. "My dear," she whispered, "you cannot carry this alone forever." Claire released a slow breath. She had rehearsed countless conversations during 5 long years, imagining anger, disbelief, accusations, even rejection. Yet she had never imagined standing here watching Cain speak so gently with the children. It reminded her why leaving had been the hardest decision she had ever made. She had never left because she stopped loving him. She had left because she believed staying would place everyone she loved in greater danger. Harrison quietly approached Elder Thomas. Should the council continue with formal questioning? Thomas slowly shook his head. Not yet. Facts without understanding often become unfair judgments. Several council members nodded in agreement. Across the ballroom, Lady Victoria remained silent for the first time all evening. Even she recognized that the innocent children standing before the court deserved compassion rather than suspicion. The atmosphere had changed completely. Curiosity still filled the room, but something gentler had begun replacing gossip. People were no longer staring only because of resemblance. They were beginning to see Noah and Lily simply as two polite, kind-hearted children raised with remarkable grace. Cain slowly stood and looked toward Claire. Countless questions filled his mind, yet only one mattered enough to escape. Were you safe? The simplicity of the question surprised everyone, including Claire herself. There was no accusation, no demand, only quiet concern. Claire held his gaze for several long seconds before answering with complete honesty. Not every day. Cain lowered his eyes, regret washing silently across his face. Claire continued in the same calm voice. But they were loved every single day. Cain looked toward Noah and Lily again. The children smiled back without hesitation, completely unaware that their quiet innocence had already begun healing wounds older than they could possibly understand. Then Noah reached into another pocket of his little jacket and carefully pulled out a faded envelope tied with a pale blue ribbon. He looked up at Claire. "Mama," he said softly, "Grandma Evelyn told me to give you this only when we came back here. She said the right people would finally be ready to hear the truth." Claire accepted the faded envelope with hands that trembled almost imperceptibly. The pale blue ribbon had been tied exactly the way her grandmother always wrapped precious things, carefully, patiently, as though every knot carried a prayer. For a long moment, she simply looked at it without moving. Memories rushed back with astonishing clarity. Evelyn sitting beside a crackling fireplace while Noah and Lily slept peacefully upstairs. Evelyn smiling gently as she placed the envelope into Claire's hands. When the children are old enough, and when fear no longer guides your decisions, return to Blackwood Citadel. If truth waits forever, it becomes another form of silence. Claire had promised. Tonight that promise had finally brought her home. Elder Thomas stepped closer. "Lady Claire, he said softly. If this letter concerns the royal court, you may choose to have it read before the council. Claire slowly nodded. It was written for this moment. She carefully untied the ribbon and unfolded the aged paper. The elegant handwriting instantly filled her eyes with emotion. It was unmistakably Evelyn's. Before Claire could begin, her voice caught in her throat. Kane noticed immediately. Without thinking, he stepped forward and quietly asked, "Would you like me to read it?" Claire looked into his silver eyes for several long seconds. There had once been a time when she trusted that voice more than any other in the world. After everything they had endured, she never imagined she would hear herself answer, "Yes." She handed him the letter. Kane accepted it with extraordinary care, almost as though he feared the fragile paper might disappear if he held it too tightly. The ballroom became perfectly still as he unfolded it. His voice remained calm, though every word carried unmistakable emotion. To whoever reads this, if this letter has finally been opened, then the truth has waited long enough. My name is Evelyn Ashford. I write these words because age has taught me that fear often hides behind misunderstanding. 5 years ago, my granddaughter did not leave because she stopped loving her family or her king. She left because someone came to her with convincing evidence that remaining inside Blackwood Citadel would place her unborn children in danger. I watched her struggle through sleepless nights before making the impossible decision to leave everything she cherished. She did not choose exile for herself. She chose it for the lives growing beneath her heart. A stunned silence settled across the hall. Kane lowered the page briefly, unable to continue for a moment. Claire quietly wiped away a single tear, but never looked away from him. He took a slow breath and continued reading. Claire wanted to tell Kane the truth countless times. I stopped her every time. That burden belongs to me alone. I believed distance would protect everyone until I could uncover who created the deception. Unfortunately, my strength failed before my search ended. If you are reading this now, then I ask only one thing. Judge neither Claire nor Kane for the years they lost. Two loving hearts can be separated by lies more easily than by hatred. Kane's voice grew quieter with every sentence. If Noah and Lily stand beside their mother, know this with absolute certainty. They were raised with kindness every single day. Claire never allowed bitterness to become their inheritance. She taught them respect. She taught them forgiveness. She taught them to speak well even of those who unknowingly caused her pain. If there is still goodness inside this kingdom, let these children inherit that goodness instead of old sorrow. When Kane reached the final line, his hands were no longer steady. And to you, Kane Blackwood, if destiny grants you another chance to stand before the family you never knew you still had, do not waste another sunrise believing silence is strength. Love has always required courage. The letter slipped slightly as Kane lowered it. No one inside the ballroom spoke. Several elders quietly brushed tears from their eyes. Even Lady Victoria lowered her gaze with visible regret. Harrison slowly exhaled, realizing how many lives had been shaped by one terrible misunderstanding. Kane folded the letter carefully before walking toward Claire. He stopped only a few feet away. "I believed you abandoned us," he admitted softly. Claire answered with equal honesty. "I believed leaving was the only way to protect them." Neither accusation remained between them anymore. Only two broken pieces of the same story finally fitting together. Noah looked up from one adult to the other, puzzled by the tears around the room. "Mama," he whispered, "did Grandma Evelyn write something sad?" Claire knelt beside both children and gently smiled through her tears. "No, sweetheart." She kissed the top of his head before looking at Lily. "She wrote something brave." Lily wrapped both little arms around Claire's neck. "Grandma always said brave people tell the truth even when they are scared." Claire closed her eyes, holding both children close. Kane watched the quiet embrace, understanding at last that everything he had mourned for 5 long years had never truly been lost. It had simply been waiting for truth to find its way home. For several quiet moments, no one moved. The words from Evelyn's letter seemed to linger beneath the vaulted ceiling like moonlight itself, reaching every heart that had gathered inside Blackwood Citadel. Elder Thomas slowly closed the ceremonial ledger and stepped to the center of the royal platform. His voice carried the calm authority of a man who had witnessed generations rise and fall beneath the same moon. The Royal Council has heard both truth and testimony. No accusation remains before this court. Lady Claire Ashford stands before us not as one who abandoned her people, but as a mother who carried an impossible burden with extraordinary courage. A gentle murmur swept through the assembled nobles. One by one, the elders lowered their heads toward Claire in silent respect. It was a gesture rarely offered, reserved only for those whose honor had been publicly affirmed before the kingdom. Claire looked genuinely overwhelmed. She had imagined returning countless times during sleepless nights over the past 5 years, but never had she imagined standing before the very people who once doubted her and receiving their respect instead of their suspicion. Noah tugged softly on her sleeve. "Mama, why is everyone bowing?" Claire knelt beside him and smiled through fresh tears. "Because sometimes people choose kindness after they finally understand the whole story." Noah nodded thoughtfully. "That is better than arguing." Elder Margaret laughed softly. "You may be wiser than many adults, young man." Lily looked around the ballroom and smiled when she noticed more friendly faces than uncertain ones. Several noble women who had watched silently all evening now smiled warmly at the twins. An elderly beta offered Lily a tiny silver flower carved from polished wood, while another gentleman bowed politely to Noah and complimented his excellent manners. The children accepted every greeting with cheerful gratitude, completely unaware that only an hour earlier many of these same guests had questioned whether they even belonged there. Cain slowly turned toward the gathered council. His expression carried quiet determination. "There is one more matter that belongs before the royal court." Every conversation faded once again. Cain looked toward Noah and Lily before continuing. "The children have committed no wrong. They should never carry the weight of misunderstandings created by adults." Elder Thomas inclined his head. "We agree." Cain took another measured step forward. "Then let the record of this kingdom show that from this night forward, Noah Ashford and Lily Ashford shall always be welcomed under the protection of the Northern Crown." The declaration echoed throughout the ballroom. Harrison immediately opened the ceremonial ledger and carefully recorded every word. Several council members placed their signatures beneath the entry, making the proclamation part of the permanent royal record. Noah blinked in surprise. "Does that mean we can come back?" Laughter rippled gently through the hall. Cain smiled warmly. "Yes." Noah's face brightened. "Can we visit the library too? Mama says castles always have the best books." Cain's smile widened even further. "Our library has more stories than I have ever finished reading." Lily clapped her hands happily. "I like stories." "So do I," Cain admitted. Claire watched the simple exchange with quiet emotion. There was no royal ceremony grand enough to compare with seeing her children accepted without fear, without whispers, without judgment. This was all she had wanted from the moment she decided to return. Lady Victoria slowly stepped away from the circle of nobles and approached Claire once more. This time there was no trace of guarded pride in her expression. She bowed respectfully. "Lady Claire, I owe you an apology." Claire looked at her with gentle surprise. Victoria continued, "I allowed rumors to become stronger than compassion. That was my mistake." Claire studied her for a long moment before offering a sincere smile. "Then let tonight be the beginning of something better for all of us." Victoria returned the smile with visible relief. "I would like that." Around the ballroom, other nobles quietly followed her example. One after another, they greeted Claire with genuine respect instead of distant curiosity. Some apologized openly. Others simply welcomed her home. Claire accepted every gesture with quiet grace, never allowing old pain to overshadow the kindness being offered now. Elder Thomas looked toward Cain with thoughtful eyes. "Your Majesty, the kingdom has witnessed justice tonight. It has also witnessed mercy. Those are the foundations upon which lasting peace is built." Cain nodded silently. He understood that no royal decree could restore 5 lost years. No title could return missed birthdays, first words, or quiet evenings beside a fireplace. Yet perhaps the future still held opportunities the past had stolen. Noah suddenly reached for Lily's hand and looked up at Cain with complete innocence. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "Grandma Evelyn always said families become stronger after they tell each other the truth." Cain looked at the twins, then at Claire, whose eyes quietly met his across the moonlit ballroom. For the first time since she had walked through those great doors, neither sorrow nor uncertainty stood between them. Only a future that had not yet been written, waiting patiently for all 4 of them to decide what the next chapter would become. The celebration gradually returned to life, but it no longer felt like the same grand moon ball that had begun only hours earlier. The orchestra played once again, softer this time, allowing laughter and quiet conversations to flow naturally through the magnificent hall. The towering chandeliers still scattered golden light across polished marble, yet something far more meaningful had illuminated Blackwood Citadel that evening. Truth had finally found its place. Claire stood beside one of the great windows overlooking the moonlit forest while Noah and Lily eagerly admired the carved statues lining the ballroom with Elder Margaret. For the first time since crossing the castle gates, she allowed herself to breathe without carrying the weight of fear. 5 years of protecting her children alone had taught her resilience. Tonight reminded her that resilience did not always mean walking by herself. Gentle footsteps approached from behind. She already knew who they belonged to. Kane stopped beside her, leaving enough space to honor everything they had both endured. Neither of them rushed to fill the silence. Beyond the windows, the ancient pines swayed beneath the silver moon exactly as they had years before, untouched by misunderstandings that had changed so many lives. "They are remarkable," Kane said quietly, watching Noah excitedly explain something to Lily beside a marble wolf statue. Claire smiled with unmistakable pride. "They remind me every day that hope grows even after difficult winters." Kane nodded slowly. "I missed so much." Claire did not deny it. She simply answered with gentle honesty. "Yes, you did." There was no anger in her voice, only truth. Kane accepted it without defense. "I cannot ask for those years back." He looked down for a brief moment before meeting her eyes again. "But if there is any chance to earn tomorrow, I will spend every sunrise trying." Claire searched his face carefully. The proud young alpha she had once loved had become a wiser man, one willing to admit regret without hiding behind authority. It did not erase the past. Neither of them expected it to. Healing was not forgetting. Healing was choosing not to let yesterday decide every tomorrow. Before she could answer, 2 small voices echoed across the ballroom. "Mama!" Noah and Lily came running together, slowing only at the last second because Claire had always reminded them that castles still had polished floors. Noah stopped between Claire and Kane, looking from one to the other with complete seriousness. "Can I ask another question?" Claire smiled. "You always do." Noah looked up at Kane. "Would you like to have dessert with us?" Kane blinked in surprise. "Dessert?" Noah nodded enthusiastically. "Grandma Evelyn said it is easier to become friends when there is pie." Lily agreed immediately. "Especially apple pie." Several nearby guests quietly smiled as they listened. Kane laughed softly, the warm sound surprising even himself. "Your grandmother was a very wise woman." Noah crossed his arms thoughtfully. "So, is that a yes?" Kane glanced toward Claire, silently asking permission without words. She looked at the hopeful faces of the twins, then back at the man who had once been her entire future. After a long moment, she gave the smallest nod. "I think Grandma Evelyn would have wanted us to share the pie." Noah grinned so widely that several guests laughed again. "I knew it." A little while later, away from the grand ballroom, a quiet family dining room was prepared overlooking the castle gardens. There were no royal ceremonies, no crowded audience, and no endless speeches. Only a simple wooden table, warm candlelight, fresh apple pie, hot cider, and 4 chairs. Noah insisted everyone hold hands before eating because that was how Grandma Evelyn had always begun every family meal. Claire reached for Noah's hand. Lily reached for Claire's. After only the briefest hesitation, Kane reached for Lily's small hand, and Noah happily completed the circle by taking Kane's other hand. No titles existed around that table. No king. No former Luna. Only 4 people sharing the same quiet moment beneath the same gentle moon. Noah closed his eyes. "Thank you for food," he said sincerely. "Thank you for stories. Thank you for families that find each other again." Lily added, "And thank you for pie." Everyone laughed together. Claire looked across the table at Kane. Neither of them spoke, because some moments were too complete for words. Outside, moonlight covered Blackwood Citadel in peaceful silver, while deep within its ancient walls, a broken story had finally found its way toward a hopeful ending. The kingdom would remember that night because the Alpha King welcomed his family home. But Noah and Lily would remember something much simpler. They would remember that the first night they truly became a family again began not with a throne, a crown, or a ceremony, but with 4 hands joined around a small table, warm apple pie, quiet laughter, and the gentle certainty that love, when guided by truth and forgiveness, always knows the way back home.